Hello race fans and welcome to the 2024 URL Karting Championship Round 3 Finals. So we're still here at Parkwood, this video following on from the previous one which showed the quali heats. So all 13 drivers took part in 2 quali heats each, all scoring points depending on their finishing positions, which then fed them into either the A final or the B final for this video. So there's lots of drama, as all the evenly matched drivers seem to have come together here for the finals quite nicely. It's all worked out really well. The floodlights were on now for the finals, whereas we started still in sort of the end of the daylight, so that a bit of a changing in the conditions out there. The track was slightly drier after the downpour we saw just before the quali heats took place, but it's still very, very treacherous out there, and the lap times didn't improve by a right lot. Still out there on obviously slick karting tyres, so lots of excitement out there for the finals. So a quick reminder of how qualifying went for all the drivers then. So it's D. Millar, who won both of his, will start on pole in the A final ahead of McLaughlin, who him and Davison, who both took part in Group 2's quali heats, exchanged wins in second place as McLaughlin ahead on the fastest lap rule. Glover, who took second place in both of the Group 1 quali heats, starts P4. Horton, his long-standing rival in behind him, took third in both the same races, so he starts P5. Wash then just bests Cave by a single point. As they round out the A final, they'll both be very happy to be in the faster final. It's worth a few more points, and Wash ahead of Cave. He certainly made a point of mentioning that a few times, both before and after this final. So starting at the head of the B final is Housley. He just beats Divine based on the fastest lap rule as well, so they were both on 7 points, missing out on the A final by a single point. Then got the 2 Gaslars, their big rivals as well. They both joined on 5 points. Again, that fastest lap rule coming in and giving G. Millar the edge going into this one as he starts slightly ahead on the grid. Paddy scored 4 points in total despite finishing 6th in both of his races, as Blake suffered from being in the bigger group in the quali heats, so finishing last in that group was actually P7, which was only worth a single point. So he's got it all to do from the back. And if you look back at the first quali heat, he started on pole, spun it and actually came last, so he's got a lot of work to do to make up in this B final. Quickly recapping the table coming into this one. So the gap had opened up a little bit at the top. It's now 5 points, that gap. And then McLaughlin 6 points behind Horton. Glover just a point behind him, and Davison just 5 behind him. So that top 5 only separated by 17 points. So it's still really, really tight at this stage of the season. There's then a little bit of a gap down to Cave and Hopkins. We're both joint on 81. Cave making the A final, whereas Hopkins in the B final, so he'll certainly come out with more points. Wash in a similar position. He's just 3 points behind Hopkins, but starts in the faster final, which is worth more points. So a big opportunity for him to make up some places in the table here. You've then got Blake, Millar, Housley, Divine, McDermott are all in the same race in these finals and not separated by a right lot of points. And then the bottom 4 in the table for this stage were all absent from this event. So here we go then, we kick off with the B final. So it's Housley starting on pole ahead of Divine. He's got G. Millar right in behind him. He'll be looking to make some early moves with Chef. He struggled with his car in the last round of the quali heats, so he's hoping that he can do a bit more starting from P4. Paddy starting P5 ahead of Elliott. Elliott really with a point to prove out there. He's in some new gear for this event. He'd certainly like to not come home in last place. He's done in a new helmet, new suit, all that gear. Don't want to be accused of no idea. So here we go. The lads lined up on the grid. Craig sat right. There go the lights. Craig gets the better launch. You can see Divine covering off Millar in behind there. Elliott looks like he's got off the line well, but he looks like he may have been covered off by Chef there. You then see a bit of carnage down in turn 1. G Millar forced wide. Looks like the chef has managed to get past him, but Craig holds on to P1 for now, but it is tight. Chef there, P3. G Millar looks for a move, makes contact, and he's out, and he's spun, and he's trapped Paddy too. Tries to get himself back round and puts himself in the barrier. That is the worst start he could have possibly wished for. He's also hampered Paddy's start. The marshal having to come out to push him back, to get him back round. And here they come round the corner for the first time. It's Divine ahead of Housley, Chef right behind him. There's Blake coming through, and there's Paddy with a wonderfully polite greeting for the cameraman. And then here you go. Unfortunate start for him. Tried to make a move, slid into him, shake there as he comes round. He's got some ground to make up, but look at these three coming through. Divine is broken away from this pack, but these three in behind really close. So it's Housley just ahead of Chef, just ahead of Elliot. Paddy doing his best to try and close that gap if he can. Round they come. It looks like there might have been a move there in behind. So Divine's got a bit of a gap. He's looking back, seeing where it... Oh, here it goes, look. Chef gets through and he's forced Housley wide. Blake gets through as well. So they all swap positions coming through there. Bit of Tokyo drift there from Paddy as he comes squealing round that final corner. Here comes G Millar, keeps a nice tight line, head down, focus on, can he catch them? So it was Elliot Blake in the end who managed to get the win here. It was a real battle out there. Divine did really well, but it was just still really slippy. Drivers struggling. Blake managed to close that gap and make the move and take P1. Chef finishes on the podium, did get ahead of Housley. He was the man this time complaining that he had issues with his kart, and that was holding him back and made him struggle as much as he did. He'd be disappointed having started on pole to finish off the podium in the B final. G Millar set the quickest lap of this race, and by a reasonable margin, by nearly a second. So he definitely had the pace in there. Just such a shame that he had that incident on lap 1. In catching the pack back up, he did catch Paddy back up, and in trying to get back past Paddy, it was in almost identical place to when he had his collision with Chef. And he collided with Paddy again and ended up back in the barrier again, which set him back even further. So if he'd have not had one of those collisions, could he have maybe made up an extra place? Who knows? He'll be disappointed though. Very frustrated to come out P5 when he clearly looked to have the fastest pace in that group and could have come out in first in that race. Paddy seemed to take to just drifting for the last 5-6 laps of that race, and we've just seen how sideways he could get without spinning. So he seemed to have a lot of fun despite coming home P6 in the B final. Now we move to the main event, the A final, and it is Millar starting on pole, won both of his quali heats ahead of the fellow Dan McLaughlin, who got a first and a second, but did manage to take the fastest laps in their heats in Group 2. Davison starts P3, just ahead of Glover in P4, who has his long-time rival Horton alongside him there. Was ahead of Cave. How will those two fare in the fast final here? They'll certainly be looking to try and capitalise on any squabbling up ahead of them. Here come the lads off the B final. G Millar clearly very frustrated with his performance. They had a lot of fun out there though. We then skip forward, climbing into the car that will start on pole. go, it's a very short run. A couple of quick weaves, try and get any temperature you can. Kart 6 has been sat there, didn't run. This kart, obviously the kart numbers change each time, but this particular go-kart didn't run in the B final, sat in the pit lane for the duration of that. So perhaps getting a little bit colder than those other karts that are out there. You can see that we're properly into the night time now. The floodlights are on for the finals, and we line up ahead of McLaughlin as the steward tells us to wait for the lights. And it's lights out and away we go. It's a reasonable launch. Can he hold on though? McLaughlin looked to get a decent launch as well, but not quite as solid. Can we keep it tidy through turn 1? It's a wide slide again. It's such a slippy turn. Fortunately, the drivers in behind all seem to have the same issue. So it's a solid start. It's exactly what we wanted. Now to try and settle into some kind of a rhythm. This is another really slippery section. You've got to take it so careful. There's a wide slide there. Take a little bit of that curb on your way through, as that has a bit more traction. But there you go. We've not dropped anyone. Davison, that is, right alongside us in kart 12, looking to make an early move. He stuck with us for most of this race and made sure it was a real battle. Here we go, looking back over the shoulder, seeing whereabouts he is. Heavy on the brakes, but nice and early so we can keep it tight. Still slides that little bit wide, and we've managed to keep enough traction and keep a decent line there to power through to this section now as the track begins to tighten into the centre. Really tentative through that one to try and keep the tight line. A shake of the head because we know we're going too slowly through there, and Davison's closing the gap in that bit. But then we managed to open it back out with a decent exit there. But then we slide wide, contact with the barrier. Another shake of the head. Is that enough for Davison to catch? Not quite. So we hold on as we come through on to lap 3. Bombing down to this first corner. And we don't see a right lot for a while now. So we go back to sped up, and you can follow us round. We do keep looking over our shoulder as Davison is still right there with us and keeping us on our toes. Any sort of mistake and he will be right there. We rejoin, we see Horton on the other side, and then disaster. It's a spin coming into an innocuous corner, and that's how close Davison had been all the way through the race, and he straight away takes the advantage as then Glover slips through as well, and then we make a mistake going into the next corner, trying to make that ground up, down to P3 with just a handful of laps left. Really frustrating. Big shake of the head as we now have to chase Glover down and see if we can recover anything before the end of this race. Here's definitely a place you don't really want to launch in this sort of weather. We've gone a bit too deep, tried to take too much speed, still frustrated. Fortunately, the boys ahead have done the same, not lost too much ground there, but then trying to take too much, and we've just lost all traction at this point. We slide wide and plough into that barrier. So twice having issues at that same part of the lap, really costing us. But we're still on the back of the two ahead. Glover closing the gap right up on Davison, the lead of the race. He slides a bit more than we do through that penultimate corner, does Glover, so we've closed right up onto the back of him. Can we get a bit of a run down into turn 1? Well, just a cart's length between us. We've got to be really brave to look for a move here, so we back out, get early on the brakes, look to get the traction. We've got the better line through here, and we've got the run up the hill, but Glover's got a better line than Davison, so he goes wide looking for a move. We need to try and pick our time here. Glover's made a move, he's gone to the inside, sparks coming from the underside of his car, another bit of secondary bit of contact, that sends Glover wide into that section, so we move up into P2 and we're on the back of Davison now, and chasing down, we get a better run through there, we've got a bit more grip, we're on the inside, and here we go, we run up to the final corner, and we hold the inside. We've passed Davison, shaking the kart to try and get any extra bit of momentum out of it. Now, just to try and keep it clean. It's a wide run through there. You can see the kart sliding. The two boys behind, both squabbling with each other, which I think has done us a favour and bought us a little bit of room. But we've got to be so tentative into this section now. No mistakes to the end is sort of what saying to yourself under your helmet. Looking back, these two are really hounding us now. Big slide out of that corner, a panicked look back. Fortunately, we've got enough of a gap that we managed to hold on. The spectators there at the side, you can see, watching over the drama unfolding in the final laps here. Another frantic look over the shoulder. Get turn one right, it's key. But no, it's a big slide, it's really deep. Can they make a move? A shake of the head. Now there is where I think there was an issue that we don't see on camera, where Glover had gone for a move on Davison at the same time as we'd run wide, and they end up making some quite heavy contact. Davison ended up slipping back because the next time we look back, it's Glover that's hunting us down. So we're coming round now. The second to last corner, it's still slippy through there. We've stayed out the barrier though this time. Final corner, we round it, the checkered flag is waving, and what late drama. Fell to P3 with just a few laps to go, and somehow we've managed to recover. So that's a clean sweep of wins. But what a brilliant end to that race. Here you go, you see Glover alongside us. Horton was there, shaking his head on the other side of the track. He was really struggling, nowhere near this fight for the win. A little bit of sliding the karts about on the way back, just to demonstrate just how slidey it is out there. Here you go, look, really slowly into the corner. As soon as you put your foot down, woof, sideways. So even just going really slowly, messing about on the way back in, just showing how slippy the conditions still were. So Glover gets to be the first man back into the pit lane. But we take the win for the session.
Oh, cheers, pal. I was ready for 12. Yeah. Did you get it on camera?
Lovely in the steward there. He was rooting for Davison in behind to win the race. Didn't want us to win it, so always love to have fans out on track. I guess that's what it feels like to be number one. So there's the final standings then for the big final, and it was myself that took the win, as well as the fastest lap by 1/10 of a second, or less than 1/10 of a second over McLaughlin, 1/10 of a second over Davison, just 0.02 between those two. It was Glover who took P2. Davison not particularly happy about the way it happened in those closing laps. McLaughlin, who started P2, falls from the podium. He'll be frustrated with that. Was kept ahead of Cave, which will be really happy with that. P5 in the A final was a great result. But Horton really struggled with his car out there, fighting his way to P7. He seemed to be battling the car the entire time. Just didn't have any joy out there whatsoever. Very frustrated from him, and he's lost some big ground in the championship too. Looking at the fastest laps for the final, and it was your winner who took the fastest lap with 42.68, just 0.02 ahead of Dan McLaughlin. Davison was then in there just 1/10 behind ahead of Glover. It was then G. Millar who suffered in Group 2 in Final B from that mistake he made early on. He was the 5th fastest driver out there in terms of his fastest pace, so he'd be really frustrated. That was a pace that would have really competed in the A final. It's a shame he couldn't show it how he quite wanted to. Was ahead of Cave by a 10th, he'll be happy with that. And then it was Elliot Blake who won the B final, coming in P8. Horton, P9 overall, so he was struggling with his kart, but he still wasn't the slowest man out there. It was then the Chef ahead of Divine, who took P2, ahead of Housley, with Paddy playing Tokyo Drift in P13. So looking at the total points scored for round 3 then over at Parkwood, when we had the quali points and the final points. Obviously there was the bonus point available for each fastest lap too, which will have made a little bit of a difference here. So it's D. Millar who comes out on top, the championship leader, extending his lead naturally here by winning overall. It was then Glover who took P2 by a point ahead of McLaughlin. Davison then just another point behind those two, so still really tight up at the top. Horton will be really frustrated with that final race and with his 2 P3 finishes in the quali heats as well, to be fair. He comes away with 51 points, that's 10 points less than his championship rival, who's just a point behind coming into this race, wasn't he? Was matched him for this race, so he'll be really happy with that to come in joint P5 for the event, ahead of Cave, who was his big rival out there. It was then Divine who had a really solid end to this round, coming in P2 in his final, in the B final. Housley frustrated with his car in the final, and that's dragged him back down and close, but into this group of rivals that's fourfold really. It's Housley, Chef Hopkins, Elliot Blake and G. Millar, and the 4 of them are separated by 2 points, which is brilliant for the competition there. G. Millar will be really frustrated with his performance in the final, particularly with the pace that he showed he had, and Elliot will be really frustrated with how the quali went, because he managed to win the final, so once he got to grips with it, he had some pace in there as well. It just took a while to come round and be able to really show it. Paddy playing Tokyo Drift towards the end, as we've mentioned, taking just 8 points for the final, bringing his total to 38. So, bringing round 3 to an end, what does that mean for the championship standings? Well, the gap has extended to 12 points at the top. D. Millar building a bit of a barrier up there. Glover has jumped McLaughlin, and the gap now to Horton is just 2. McLaughlin just a point in behind, and Davison just 5 behind them, so it's a really, really tight pack still. Anyone who misses a session at this point, or makes mistakes, or happens to land a poor kart, can really, really suffer. The gap then opens up a little bit as it's Cave in P6. Wass manages to jump Shep for P7, and he's just 2 points behind his rival, with the Chef just 2 points behind him. Blake is then 7 points down, with D. Millar another 10 points back, with Housley just 3 points behind him. And then Divine joining in on that group, he's just 7 points behind them. Paddy another 11 points back, and then you've got the lads that didn't attend this one, so it's Tracy from Jackson, from C. Millar, from Schofield, rounding out the league table. Well, that's all she wrote for round 3, so we shall leave you with a slow-mo clip and the agonising cry of your championship leader as he thought he'd thrown the entire race away with just a few laps to go. Thanks very much for watching, and we shall see you at the next one, which will be hosted by Blyton Park in Gainsborough.